Many people who knew Pope John Paul II didn't know he was a worker when he was younger. At 19 years old, he works in a mine and in the chemical plant Solvay in Poland. He works while simultaneously going through formation in the clandestine seminary in Krakow.
Questa esperienza di un operaio e nello stesso tempo di un seminarista clandestino mi è rimasta per tutta la vita, venendo nella fabbrica per fare il mio turno, 8 ore di giorno o di notte. Ho portato con me alcuni libri. I miei colleghi, vuol dire gli operai, si sono meravigliati un po', ma non scandalizzati. Mi hanno detto, ti aiuteremo, anche puoi dormire un po' e al tuo posto cercheremo di sorvegliare. E così ho fatto gli esami anche, gli esami davanti ai miei professori, tutto in clandestinità.
The fact that he suffers firsthand and survives under the two most criminal systems of the 20th century, Nazism and communism, gives him a determined and audacious character. He is a man who holds freedom in great esteem because he knows what it means to lose it.
Aprite i confini degli stati, i sistemi economici come quelli politici, i vasti campi di cultura, di civiltà, di sviluppo. Non abbiate paura.
That's where the person in charge of collecting evidence of His Holiness more clearly sees the supernatural intervention after his death. He has a special predilection for those suffering injustice, poverty, and oppression.
I think of freedom as the expression of social justice. John Paul II lived as a worker. Surely, here, he lived his entire life as a worker. He knew this reality very well. He always defended and gave a voice to the voiceless, again because of persecution, poverty.
John Paul II plays a very relevant role in the fall of communism in Eastern Europe. His insistence on peaceful resistance and mercy transforms Poland, his native country, into a vanguard of liberation.
The Pope acted there first as a Polish patriot, because he was a huge patriot. Then he acted as a spiritual father for those men who had risked their lives by rising up against the communist power which ruled at the time. In Pope John Paul II, it's very difficult to distance or separate, let's say, religious aspects from political aspects. That's because he didn't do politics the way a politician does. Rather, he did politics as a pope, as a father, concretely, as a father of his Polish nation.
Unafraid of challenging the authority of the most powerful, John Paul II pushes for freedom, not only in his own country, but in the whole world.
However, the Pope also contributes greatly to the fall of the Filipino dictator Stroessner and many others, even Pinochet. For this reason, his action, inspired by his religious convictions, later has political ramifications.
The fall of the communist regime, without any bloodshed, has been, for many, a miracle of St. John Paul II. Behind this diplomatic activity is one of John Paul II's extraordinary virtues, his enormous capacity to work day and night with complete dedication to his mission. His efforts to serve the Church and all of society are evident in the 104 trips he makes during his pontificate and in his international fame. Besides that, in the 27 years of John Paul II's pontificate, the Vatican goes from holding diplomatic relations with 84 countries to 172. It is a kind of diplomatic activity that overwhelms those who work in the Curia. St. John Paul II's life isn't easy. His mother's death leaves him an orphan when he is only 9 years old. At age 12, he loses his older brother. His father passes away when he is 20. He is left alone in the world. The cross presents itself in his life from that first moment, but his trust in God allows him to keep moving forward and to overcome Nazi and communist persecution. His closeness to suffering grants him a special ability to empathize with those who are oppressed or in difficult situations. The loss of his parents and his brother leads him to see others as his own family. It is an affection felt by anyone who approaches him for a conversation. He manifests this acceptance of the cross during his own illness, living his last days on earth in an exemplary way.
John Paul II clearly had a mystical view of suffering for all Christians, but he not only wrote about it, he also was able, with the grace of God, to live it. And that was very moving, to see that he could not only preach the mystery of the cross to the church, but he was asked ultimately to live the mystery of the cross, as we all are in death. And God gave him the grace to be faithful to that mission and to live in conformity with Christ crucified even to the last moments of his pontificate. That's a great grace.
This image of the Pope, which words can't express, is the last one taken and preserved of him with life. It's his final effort to respond to the faithful, who gather in the square to accompany him during these decisive moments. The lines that form around St. Peter's Basilica to say goodbye to John Paul II make history. In Rome, there is no memory of a manifestation of affection like the one in these days, during which around 3 million people flock to the Eternal City to bid their final farewell to their Pope. That marks the end of 26 years, during which the Catholic Church recovers prestige and respect around the world. Secure and always with a rosary in hand, the Polish Pope keeps calling the youth together. He is a Pope who remains alive today in the hearts of millions of people who continue to spread his message. Just a few drops of St. John Paul II's blood are enough to get the multitude back out on the streets. This is something Sister Mary Angela Walker knows well, as she spends years carrying this relic around America.
There were thousands and thousands of people every night, every day, waiting in line sometimes for 12 to 15 hours just to spend a moment with the relic, a moment in prayer. And we saw from those crowds, but also on the faces of each of those that passed us, with all that they carried in their hearts. Many families came, whole families would come. Women who were expecting, we always made a point of blessing them with the relic, not only the mothers, but also the babies in the womb.
Sister Mary Angela and her companions are really surprised by the demonstrations of affection. They're even more astounded, however, when they start to see the results.
There were also many miraculous pregnancies that came out of the veneration of the relic, which there was one that we prayed with the couple in the first pilgrimage of the relic, and then a year later, when the relic returned, the couple came back with their child, who had been conceived through the intercession of St. John Paul II.
Especially noteworthy is the healing of an 8-year-old boy in Buenos Aires, Argentina, who was in a coma. They bring him a picture of the relic. The effect is immediate.
The next morning, we began early the veneration, and this couple came in tears. They shared that the day before, 15 minutes after the image of the relic had been placed on the boy that we had been interceding, the boy woke up. He opened wide his eyes. He was talking and acting normally like any little boy. He was anxious to get out of the bed. And the doctors were astounded. They immediately went to do imaging, and they found no injuries in his brain. It was perfectly normal.
After being in a coma for some time, the boy is shown the relic and the image of John Paul II. The result is a huge surprise.
Immediately, the little boy said, "Oh, of course," upon seeing the picture of St. John Paul. "Of course, he's the one I saw." A man came to me while I was sleeping, referring to when he was in the coma, of course, and said, "Don't be afraid. Soon you will be perfectly well."
These are experiences that have impacted many people and that keep St. John Paul II's message alive.
Pourquoi moi?
Why me? It's a mystery. Well, if one looks into it, I had the same illness as John Paul II, Parkinson's disease. We are at the service of life and the family, and John Paul II, that is what he always defended.
Él dice, abrir las puertas de tu corazón a
He
Cristo.
says, open wide the doors of your heart to Christ. I always tell people that when you open the doors of your heart to Christ, you will see God's mercy, because that's what I witnessed. I opened my heart with faith, trusting that God would get me out of this, but I also accepted His will. However, when you firmly believe in God, God's mercy is there.
100 years after his birth, St. John Paul II's courage and smile continue to bring down walls. Many of them are interior, thus deeply transforming people. Others, however, are visible to others. In the hearts of millions of faithful around the world, John Paul II remains alive.